Morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Greetings to my 400 affiliates across the globe. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Thank you for listening on this Monday, February the 24th. Here is the rundown. Coronavirus has skipped every boundary, broken through every barrier, and is running wild through the world. Not yet in thousands of cases, but in hundreds of cases in various countries. And as a result, international markets are shaken. Not yet shattered, but shaken. In Hong Kong, the market was down last night 1.71%. In England and Germany, the losses are approaching 4%. The United States markets will probably see a similar drop of between 3 and 5% today. And I expect the slide could continue for many, many days until there is either effective quarantining internationally or some kind of a development of a treatment. I've been telling you about this since January. You can't blame me that you didn't see it coming. Gold is up almost 2.5% this morning. You can thank me. I told you to buy gold in January. The 10-year Treasury, AndrewandTodd.com, are going to be going crazy today as everybody and their brother is going to want to buy property in the next 4 to 6 weeks. AndrewandTodd.com are mortgage lenders with Sierra Pacific Mortgage, 888-888-1172, and their phones go crazy whenever it's below 1.8% or 1.9%. Well, the 10-year yield is down to 1.47%. I'm blinking. Yep, 1.47%. And it will go lower throughout the day. Lower and lower and lower. And stocks will open very low, and they'll be off 3, 4, 5%. Apple could be down 5% at the start of this market. They get really hit. Amazon could be down, my goodness, 4%. And Amazon is going to benefit from people self-isolating. How bad is it in the world? Well, China has postponed its annual legislative meeting. They have reimposed all of the quarantines that they had just lifted hours ago in Wuhan, where the virus began. Iran has confirmed the death toll has risen to 12. The Japanese are apologizing, defending, sort of passive-aggressive about how they handled the virus cruise ship. As I mentioned, South Korea reports 70 additional new cases of coronavirus. Unfortunately, the virus got into a super-secret cult, a messianic end-of-the-world kind of cult. And I think they get together and huddle and hold hands, and that's a great thing for a virus to percolate in. And Iran is not telling us the truth. They've got a real problem. And I don't know why it went to Iran in such big numbers. And Italy's got a real problem. But what President Trump ought to do is put the vice president in charge of this, along with Secretary Azar of HHS, name a few governors like Doug Ducey and Ron DeSantis, a couple of Democrats, of course. Go get some big medicine people from Mayo and Cleveland. Go get some big defense people since they know how to produce things en masse. Basically go to war footing like 1918 because we've been expecting a virus for a long time. If it turns out to be a false alarm and coronavirus goes away, great. Wonderful. It could reappear in 6 months, which is what the virus in 1918 did. And yes, you should read John Barry's The Great Influenza. Meanwhile, Donald Trump is receiving what can only be called a rapturous welcome in India with Prime Minister Modi. Bollywood is producing amazing memes, which I've shared at my Twitter feed. They're funny. The president has announced a $3 billion defense deal with India. I assume that he said it's helicopters. That must be Sikorsky's. I don't know. Trump says namaste, hello in India. There's a massive rally underway. And I mean, just one of the most massive rallies I've ever seen in India. 1 minute ago, the president tweeted out, our two national constitutions both begin with the same 3 beautiful words, we the people. That means that in America and India alike, we honor, respect, trust, empower, and fight for the citizens we proudly serve. And there's a picture of President Trump and Prime Minister Modi. He's also posted a tweet in Hindu, which when translated reads, America and India will strengthen their countries, enrich their people, and make big dreamers bigger and make their future brighter than ever. And this is only the beginning. So pretty good, solid relationship with India unfolding on this trip. Contrast that with the depression in the Democratic Party. Chris Matthews on MSNBC on Bernie Sanders has basically locked up the Democratic nomination. And if you're voting Saturday, this coming Saturday in South Carolina, and you're Republican, help them do that. Go with Bernie. Super Tuesday is a week from tomorrow. Go with Bernie everywhere. Bernie, Bernie, Bernie. Let's get this thing over with and get to the main event. Bernie, Trump. Donald and Bernie, Trump and Sanders. Because basically, Bernie just crushed them in Nevada. Chris Matthews said this, cut number 5.
All Bernie ever had to do, and he's done it beautifully, is get a majority of that, and he's up to the mid-30s. If you get half of 67, you're into the mid-30s, and that's where he's gotten it a little better. Biden, his only prayer was to consolidate the third of the vote that's moderate and conservative. And he got nowhere near clearing that field. Nowhere near. That's split up 4 ways now. And so with new people coming in, Deval Patrick came in, he didn't make it. Bloomberg is in, he's probably going to survive a bit longer because of his money. But that field wasn't cleared. The only way Biden could win in that 1/3 of the vote that's either moderate or conservative is to sweep it. He got nowhere near. Bernie, on the other hand, did his job. He got more than a majority of that 67%. That is the name of the game. It is pretty much over unless that changes. I was reading last night, Brian, I know you're a history guy too. I'm reading last night about the fall of France in the summer of 1940. And the general, Renault, calls up Churchill and says, it's over. And Churchill said, how can it be? You got the greatest army in Europe. How can it be over? He said, it's over. So I had that suppressed feeling. I can't be as wild as Carville, but he is damn smart. And I think he's damn right on this one.
What did Carville say? Cut number 12.
Well, we're going to see a complete change in tenor on Monday night. If we don't, then our field is really dumb. I mean, Bernie Sanders is the issue. Anytime you become the front runner, I remember when we were the front runner in 92, we got all the heat, as we should. The New York Times wrote a whitewater story, didn't get a single fact right, but at least they tried to cobble something together like they had a role to play in this. And we're plunging ahead. Meanwhile, the ABC Washington Post poll comes out. Buttigieg is plus 17 against Trump with college-educated women, and Sanders is at 2. These are the kinds of facts that people have to be presented with. We've got to, and I see that 2/3 of the Nevada caucus goers really want to win the election. I don't know if us in the media are sufficiently telling people what are the risks that you're running by doing this. I think voters need to really be appraised of what's going on here. Hopefully these candidates have the skill and are able to do this. We got a week to go before South Carolina, and then 48 hours later, you had Super Tuesday, and things are going to be happening furious and fast. And we got to gear up for an entirely different race than what you've seen before. The tenor it has changed in this race. The ground has shifted. Strategic imperatives are now different. We're entering a different time, and it's a very compressed and short time that we're in this time frame. So people had better get real. These campaigns better stay up late. They better be thinking about how they're going to put forward what they're about, how they're going to deal with the debate, how they're going to allocate scarce media resources. And some people are just not going to make it for very long, and that's just the nature of presidential politics. So we got a lot of news here coming up.
A lot of news means that Bernie Sanders is the nominee. James Carville went on, though. Cut number 13. He is not a fan of Bernie Sanders.
Right. Well, first of all, I won't mention names, but I get any number of calls from panicked congressional incumbents. I know what's happening out there. I got a real good idea. The entire theory that by expanding the electorate, increasing turnouts, you can win an election is the equivalent of climate denying. All right? When people say that, they're as stupid to a political scientist as a climate denier is to an atmospheric scientist. So whatever you do, if you want to vote for Bernie Sanders because you feel good about his program, because you don't like the banks on Wall Street or you don't like pharmaceuticals, that's completely legitimate. I understand that. If you're voting for him because you think he'll win the election because he'll galvanize heretofore sleepy parts of the electorate, then politically you're a fool. And that's just a fact. It's no denying it. There's so much political science, there's so much research on this that it's not even a debatable question. And if people are prey to this and they know that and they want to do it as Democrats, that's their own business. But I don't think that they have all of the facts that they need before they make this judgment going forward.
Generalissimo is running around inside the other studio saying that Bernie's going to expand the electorate. You just heard what James thought about that. I will be back. That's the rundown. Bad market day, bad news on coronavirus. Bernie Sanders in the prohibitive favorite for the nominee. And I'll be right back on the Hugh Hewitt Show. That's the rundown. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. That's my Meet the Press music. I was on the set with Chuck Todd and gang yesterday. Here is cut number one from Meet the Press on Sunday, February 23rd.
For years now.
4 years ago at this time, Hugh Hewitt, you were one of those people arguing, hey, Donald Trump doesn't have this in the bag. He can be stopped. There's a whole bunch of people. Now you are looking at this. You were telling me this morning, this looks like the Democrats are watching what happened to your side 4 years ago.
I watched the debate that you did this week, and I thought it was a replay of the debates I did 4 years ago. And I think James Carville, who I was with, along with you on election night, is living a dream that doesn't exist anymore, that the Democratic establishment can stop Bernie Sanders. In fact, The Atlantic this morning compared the Democratic establishment unfavorably with The Muppet Show, saying that The Muppet Show was better organized than the Democratic establishment, and I think that's unfair to The Muppet Show. I'll tell you what, if I wanted to untrumpify, using Dan's book's title, Untrumping America, I would go to Pete Buttigieg because he's the opposite.
Right.
And when you get to South Carolina, he's the representative of America's small cities and big towns. That's where he wins. Nevada has two cities. They don't have a lot of small cities. You look at Columbia, at Greenville, at Orangeville, at Hilton Head. I think Buttigieg could surprise and close that gap in South Carolina. By the way, it's Orangeburg, and I'm sorry, Orangeville. Not Orangeville, Orangeburg. I was talking about the fact that Buttigieg does well in small cities and big towns, and there aren't a lot of those in Nevada. So he's the only guy I can see surprised. But generally, I'm not buying it. Cut number two, Hugh Hewitt on the Meet the Press yesterday.
Bernie Sanders. And for Bloomberg to come in and say, hey, I'm the tough guy with a lot of money and I'm going to beat Trump, just doesn't seem like the message that he's pulling.
The movie Cats got better reviews than
Yes.
Bloomberg. It was so bad. It was maybe the worst debate performance I've seen since watching debates since 76 forward. However, Bernie can still lose this because I saw de Blasio out last night attacking Buttigieg as smug. I saw Amy Klobuchar attacking Pete Buttigieg as too perfect. You know, they're killing themselves. On the sidelines, I'm applauding, but they're killing themselves.
Dan Pfeiffer,
They are, and the Democrat knife fight continues. We moved on to other subjects, specifically my pal Rick Grinnell, cut number three.
A little bit questionable. Hugh Hewitt, the president's inability to ever condemn what Russia does only sparks this conspiracy even more, doesn't it?
Look at what he does, not what he says. And by the way, my disclosure, my son's a political appointee at state. Pompeo's a friend. Grinnell's a friend. O'Brien's a friend. They're all friends. Rick Grinnell is, outside of the cabinet, the most anti-Russian member of this administration. Trying to stop Nord Stream 2, trying to get Germany up to 2%. He is as anti-Russian
It's not
as
about
anybody.
the administration. You know this. It's about the president's words. It undermines it. That's the question. Why does his words continue to undermine this?
Because I think his general diplomacy is to speak softly and carry the biggest stick, $716 billion, in military spending, to be nice to Xi in the middle of coronavirus, to be nice to Putin rhetorically, and then to be tough on Nord Stream 2, to be tough on Crimea, to send the anti-tank missiles to Ukraine. Tough, tough, tough in actions, soft-spoken in words.
Kimberly, credible?
And that, by the way, is just the reality. Finally, cut number four.
July 28, 2019, President Trump fires the Senate-confirmed Director of National Intelligence, Dan Coats. On August 8th, the president announces that Joseph McGuire will become the acting director. On that same day, the person who was supposed to have assumed the acting director slot, Sue Gordon, who was number two, she resigned because she was passed over for that acting top job role. Then on February 19th of this year, McGuire is ousted by President Trump. The next day, Rick Grinnell is named acting director. By the way, Hugh, this is what makes this very suspicious. He made the first shakeup at DNI was timed with that whistleblower report that was making its way through the DNI. This one is timed with this report about Russian interference. That's some nasty circumstantial evidence.
If you want the person who will be most effective in countering the Russian puppetry meme, you put Rick Grinnell, who is the most anti-Russian person on there. Also the most combative.
He's pretty partisan in political activism.
You know, he came up as a Republican LGBTQ, so he is obviously going to be combative and had to earn his stripes the hard way. But if you want an anti-Russian person to combat the meme that you are pro-Russian, you put Ambassador Grinnell in that job.
I don't know that
Stop right there.
that McGuire...
I then jump ahead, and when Dan Pfeiffer begins to attack Rick Grinnell, I tell him two words: Ben Rhodes. And maybe we'll play that later in the show. But the attack on Rick Grinnell is widespread, and it's because Rick Grinnell is effective and loyal and absolutely qualified, and Democrats don't like the fact that Grinnell fights hard and wins. I'll be right back, America, with Mike Allen. Stay tuned. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. Inside the Beltway. I begin every show with a rundown of the overnight news. Mike Allen begins every morning with Axios AM. This morning, 1,172 words. It only takes 4.5 minutes to read, but in the course of those 4.5 minutes, you will see 2 Mike Bloomberg ads. Mike Allen, let's talk about Mike Bloomberg. He could buy all the ads in all the world, and he can't erase the memory of the worst debate performance I've ever seen. As I said on Meet the Press yesterday, the movie Cats got better reviews than Mike Bloomberg did.
Hugh, the difference, though, is it won't erase your memory. But if you look at how he's spending, where, how much, a lot more people will see that than will see those debate clips. Now, of course, what matters from a debate or a State of the Union is not so much the event itself, but the clips that we see here on shows like yours, on morning zoo shows, local news. So some of that got picked up, but it's fleeting compared to the message that he is going to be able to drive. And that's why his campaign is such a fascinating political science experiment. Exactly what can you buy?
That is, what can you buy? I don't think he's going to be able to buy much. We will see. I think South Carolina is in Bernie's pocket. Carville certainly agrees with me. And I believe Republicans who can vote in these open primaries, South Carolina is one, Virginia is one. I've already voted for Bernie Sanders. California is another. Texas is a fourth. That Republicans are, are going to flock to the Bernie banner and give him a little bit of a lift in those states. In fact, a significant lift. But let's talk about the other big story that you mentioned in Axios AM this morning, Mike. There is a major sell-off underway in America, and it's mirrored in Europe, where it's a 3 and a 4 and a 5% sell-off, because coronavirus is finally becoming a story. I've been covering it since January. It is finally broken into the Western press because of Italy and Iran and the death toll in South Korea. Has the presidential response been adequate to date, in your opinion?
You've been following the administration response more carefully than I have. We saw that story over the weekend, reporting that the president was personally involved with it and concerned how it was going to play for him. But yeah, Hugh, the markets are responding to the fact that this is now well beyond China. South Korea putting off the start of its school year, and the result of that is a gloomier outlook for the world economy, logistical challenges. The Telegraph of London has a story this morning about shipping bottlenecks. And yesterday, Axios' Caitlin Owens, who writes our Vitals newsletter about healthcare, had a fascinating, disturbing scoop. There are 150 drugs that, because of their connection with China, are at risk now in the U.S. The FDA has this list of at-risk drugs. We don't have our hands on the list yet, but we know that there are about 150 drugs that the administration is worried there could be a shortage of that.
They should also be worried about automatic trading kicking in and taking a steep sell-off at the beginning of the day and turning it into a rout by the end of the day, a black Monday.
I didn't mean to interrupt, but Bloomberg saying that if you look at the implied open of the stock market, today could be the worst day for U.S. stocks in 6 months.
And it could get worse because of automatic trading. And my view of this is anyone who has read John Barry's The Great Influenza, especially its epilogue, which I went back and reread, we do not have the capacity. We are just-in-time delivery country. We don't have excess bed capacity in hospitals. We do not have stowaway supplies, and we don't have any drugs that are vaccines. We don't have any drugs that work. Maybe Tamiflu works a little bit. When it gets to the United States, it will cause the end of the collective economy, meaning that people like Amazon. I'm liquid, by the way. I got out of all stocks so that I could talk about this without any kind of conflict. But I used to own Amazon. I think everyone's going to get crushed, Mike Allen. And politically, which is my focus, I don't think the president can just say Secretary Azar and Dr. Fauci take the stage. I think he needs the vice president in charge. I think he needs governors like Ducey and DeSantis, a Democrat like Raimondo in Rhode Island. I think he needs big medicine, Mayo and the Cleveland Clinic and USC, and some big tech people like Zuckerberg and big defense people from Lockheed and Boeing. They need a cabinet of 12 to 14 to come up with national responses, because what we see in China is that misinformation or a lack of information causes panic. Panic causes shutdown. Now they're telling people go back to work, and they won't go back to work. Do you think that they've internalized the threat in Team Trump?
Well, you're right about what you're saying, and this is like with a bad storm of a meteorological sort, and that is that the government showing that it's active and prepared has its own advantages in addition to the reality of what's going on under the surface.
And so, but the president does not generally like that kind of stage sharing. He likes to be the guy in charge, but there is the Katrina risk here. That's what I guess what I'm asking is, do you agree with me there is a risk that this could be his Katrina?
Well, you've debated the Katrina analogy before. I just don't know the answer to that. I agree with you completely, though, about the idea of a very muscular, visible response. And if nothing else, Hugh, it works the muscles. It gets us ready if we're fortunate and it does not become a calamity here. Then you get that cabinet together and we're more ready for the calamity when it comes, and history tells us it will come.
It will come. Coronavirus update. 5 are dead and 200 infected are in Italy. And that means Western Europe, given open borders, is going to be tested to the max. Let's turn back to politics and to South Carolina. There's a debate tomorrow night, Mike Allen. In the last debate, Mike Bloomberg wore the target. Will Bernie Sanders wear the target tomorrow night, or are they still in the belief that if they can simply take Bloomberg out of the equation, it will be a brokered convention? Because that's sure what Chuck Todd's great question at the end of the debate led one to believe, that all of the Democrats are banking on a brokered convention.
Yeah, and recognize that Bernie Sanders is the only person not only on path to have the most delegates, a plurality as the press says, but to clinch, to have the majority that you need to actually get the nomination. Nate Silver is now saying that Bernie Sanders could mathematically clinch. I had not seen that said before, and people in both parties are underestimating this. The top of Axios this morning, Jim Vandehei, Bernie's path to the presidency, and what we say is that virtually every national and swing state poll shows Sanders tied or beating Trump. And unlike every rival, he has a huge base of fervent, unshakable supporters. He can only grow.
Well, the Jim Carville disputes whether it can grow, but I do believe he is the nominee, with one exception. I think Buttigieg can come back because of my big town, small city theory, and I just test it with you, Mike, and leave it alone. Buttigieg has done well in New Hampshire and Iowa, where there are a plethora of big towns and small cities. He did badly in Nevada, where there are really only two giant cities, Reno and a giant city, Las Vegas. South Carolina, with its Orangeburg, its Greenville, its Spartanburg, its Columbia, its Hilton Head, its Myrtle Beach. They've got the kind of small cities, big towns that Buttigieg thrives in, because South Bend is everywhere. What do you make of my theory that he might surprise in South Carolina?
I like your theory, but that probably would come out of Joe Biden. And a P.S., you listen to South Carolina reporters, they say that Tom Steyer will do better than the press thinks. We pay zero attention to him, and rightly so in a national context. But he's been spending big in South Carolina. He's bought himself near the top of the polls. And for people who've not been immersed in the race, like that sudden number tomorrow night could be a surprise to you.
It will. I think Tom Steyer has taken the African American vote away from Joe Biden, and so my prediction for a week from yesterday, Saturday, it'll happen on Saturday, is Bernie wins and Buttigieg is second and Steyer is third and Joe is out. And by the way, He does have to get out, doesn't he, if he finishes out of the money in South Carolina?
I don't know the answer to that. Hugh, logically, you would say that if your conditions are accurate. But listen to this. Here's another way to say it for your listeners. 8 nights from tonight, the Democratic race could be over. The night.
That's right. Eight sleeps, as we say to grandchildren. 8 sleeps. Yeah. And so 8 sleeps from now, candidate nominee Sanders begins planning his speech in Milwaukee. Mike Allen, always a pleasure. Follow him on Twitter at Mike Allen. Get Axios AM every single morning. And get you to a theater, justicethomasmovie.com. It did very well again this weekend. Clarence Thomas, in his own words, the movie is titled Created Equal. Michael Pack is the filmmaker. He's been on this show, and I will tell you, it's doing very well because it inspires people. I keep telling you about it every hour. All you have to do is go to justicethomasmovie.com. I like the idea that we're educating America about the importance of perseverance, integrity, the ability of people to change, the ability of people to grow up. Clarence Thomas started out an angry young radical. He ended up being a great believer in the rule of law and defender of the Constitution as originally intended to operate, a great believer in America. It's all in the justicethomasmovie.com. You ought to go and see it, like Michael Beckman, my friend in Houston, went down and saw it, and I think it's good for everyone. It really is. It's good for everyone. As is, of course, honorboundcoffee.com. I'm having it this morning. I'm using my Gettysburg College mug from when I drove up to Gettysburg College to meet with the Fielding Fellows, but inside of it, Honorbound Coffee. Right here, I've got the bag in front of me. If you're watching on Univision, which I hope you are, Honorbound Coffee gives 100% of its profits, 100% of its profits to serve military families. They're starting with Semper Fi Fund. I'm going to send them additional recommendations. They are themselves looking for additional recommendations. They are Pete and Seth Talbot. They founded ReliefFactor.com and a bunch of other companies. They're very successful entrepreneurs in the Pacific Northwest. And they came to me and to Salem, and they said, we'd like to start a company that does one thing, which is give back to the military families who serve this country every single day. And so they bought a coffee company that makes great coffee, 4 different brews, 4 different grinds. It's terrific brew. And I take it every day. This isn't even cold. This is nice, popping hot, because I've got my my canister of coffee behind me, my Cuisinart coffee that I brought down to the studio today. And it's my thermos. And I would recommend to anyone honorboundcoffee.com so that every sip you take supports the military. And, of course, it's time for relieffactor.com. There's my bag if you're watching on Univision or Town Hall TV. That's my Foley effect, my little package. So easy to open. There we go. Warp Bill. Wonderful. Tastes terrific. Because it doesn't have any taste. You can swallow these pills immediately. I carry curcumin, resveratrol, and omega. The 4-pill pack helps to reduce for a temporary period of time, the minor aches and pains that plague aging and exercise. Yesterday afternoon was a beautiful day inside the Beltway. Got a 5-mile trundle in. Went to Last Chance Mass. And just in time to hear Bishop Burbidge ask for the Bishop's Lenten Appeal. How do you not give to the Bishop's Lenten Appeal in the Diocese of Arlington? But I did make Last Chance Mass after a long walk, and it's made possible because of ReliefFactor.com. Just a beautiful day in the neighborhood in the Beltway. If it wasn't for all the people here who want to actively mislead you, it would be a wonderful place to live. Don't go anywhere, America. Stay tuned to the Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. Joined now for the Yinzer Report by Salena Zito, who comes in most Mondays. I got to focus on Bernie Sanders because I don't know how Bernie's playing with the Yinzers. Hello, Salena. Good Monday morning to you.
Good Monday morning to you as well.
Well, what about, April 24th is when Pennsylvania votes, so we don't really get a good fix on the Yinzers until then. Indeed, in Buckeye land, they don't vote until March 17th. I think it's all going to be over, but for the shouting and the nominating by the time they get to Ohio or PA. But what do you hear when you put your ear to the ground in the heartland?
Well, what you hear is that most Democrats that are very robust in their turnout in a general election, which is very different from what happens in a primary. Because in the primary, you usually get either in the right or the left, the furthest corner of the party that show up. They're the ones that volunteer. They're the ones that are most excited. But they're certainly not the majority of the Democrats. Biden has always been the favorite of the majority of Democrats in Pennsylvania and also Ohio. But the writing has been on the wall, I think, since Biden first came here and here in Pittsburgh and rolled out his campaign, that he wasn't the same Biden he was 10 years ago. And so there's been this sort of fear that Bernie would rise up, and that's exactly what has happened. I mean, there's two things wrong for Democrats in a general with Biden, with Bernie at the top. In Western Pennsylvania and Ohio, it's the shale industry, natural gas, that has had a boom in both states. Not just for blue-collar workers, but also C-suite and executives and, sort of the middle executives.
And people who own homes that are benefited by the rising demand for everybody wins when you've got an energy economy that's booming.
Right. But also you tap in the Medicare for all, and that also impacts across the economic spectrum. Both suburban voters and upper middle class voters who like their insurance and want to keep their insurance and have been wavering on Trump are not going to vote for Bernie. They don't want Medicare for all. Plus, the insurance industry in Pennsylvania is the second largest employer. I mean,
I didn't know that. I did not know that. So that is, he's threatening all those jobs. Now, I'm going to play some Bernie audio from 60 Minutes last night. I nevertheless believe he's now approached inevitability status. Do you share that belief?
Yeah. I mean, unless something catastrophic happens, he's well on his way. And if you look at the cross demographics of whose vote he earned in Nevada, he's also pulling from all races and all ages.
That's what actually stunned most of the people on Meet the Press yesterday, is he did not just win young people. He won every demographic, every single one.
Well, and they focused on the wrong thing, Hugh. They've kept focusing on race, and they were categorizing people by race for who they were voting for. They weren't paying attention to, people weren't voting because of their race. They were voting because of their unions. And some of them in spite of their unions. But that's where their alignment went, not on the color of their skin.
Indeed, the Culinary Union, the much talked about Culinary Union, which I had never heard of until 2 weeks ago, tried to get people to not vote for Bernie, and the Culinary Union turns out not to represent the culinary worker very much.
And that case is very true. And when it comes to Trump and leadership, I mean, Trump says this all the time. Your leaders, they don't like me. You guys like me, and he nails it. He absolutely.
Now, Salena, I got to ask you a quick question. Lent is upon us. Wednesday begins Ash Wednesday. Is Pittsburgh still a Lenten place? Meaning, in most of the major cities of the Midwest, when Lent is on. The pace change. Is that still the case in Pittsburgh?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, the tradition is that because we have such a large Polish population. Everybody gets their punchkis, which are donuts filled with either chocolate cream or white cream or jelly. And then on Wednesday, all the churches are open, and they're pretty much open all day. You aren't sort of set by a time of a mass, but you can just go in and you get your ashes. I, for the first time in 60 years, will not be in Pittsburgh for Ash Wednesday. I'll be in D.C. looking for that, hoping to get somewhat close to that same experience.
It's the St. Matthew Great Cathedral. I'll be flying back on to the West Coast on Wednesday. But I will tell you, it's an interesting part of America that the Democratic primary doesn't understand, which are people who go to church on Ash Wednesday. It's a huge part of America. I don't believe the Democratic Party understands it in the least. If anybody does, it will be Buttigieg. We'll see if he talks about it on Tuesday night. There'll be a door prize to any Democrat who mentions Ash Wednesday. Salena, Zito, always a pleasure. Follow at the Washington Examiner. Follow on Twitter at Salena, Zito. Follow me to hour number 2 of this Monday edition of the Hugh Hewitt Show. Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Hugh Hewitt. Thank you for listening on a day that is going to be a rock and roll day on the markets because it's just a bloodbath in Europe. The German index down 3.5%, the English index down 3.5%. The 10-year Treasury has already dropped to 1.47% in the United States. I expect a massive sell-off of between 2 and 5% today on the markets. Obviously I won't be on the air when the markets close today, so we don't know how much blood will be on the ground. But coronavirus has finally caught the attention of America. Now, if you listen to this show, you know, and you have known since January, you've known for 6 weeks that this was a problem and a large one. What you do not know is that China's daily deaths rose 55% overnight. Overnight. There are now 2,625 people dead in China from coronavirus in 6 weeks. 80,000 cases, 79,434 to be specific, according to China's numbers. 24,944 of those people have allegedly recovered. Now, leaves about 50,000 people battling for their lives in China. But overnight, they reported 409 new cases of the infection, 150 new deaths. And all of the relaxation of the lockdown in Wuhan, well, they took that back. They locked Wuhan back down. Meanwhile, the news out of South Korea and Italy will turn your hair as white as mine. It's just bad. It's very, very bad. The Iranian death toll has risen to 12, and of course they lie all the time. Nobody knows what their real death toll is, but how did it get to Iran and where is it? We don't know. The mullahs don't tell us anything. They're liars. South Korea tells us everything. They have 70 new cases of coronavirus. 70 new cases. Now, the sad thing about South Korea is that someone who got infected in China turned out to be a member of a Christian messianic cult and came back to Daegu, D-A-E-G-U. Daegu, is that how you pronounce it? 2.5 million people live there. And they've been told to stay indoors as they've got 483 cases there. 28,000 citizens will be tested for the flu in Daegu. What happened? Well, one of the carriers came back and went to this Messianic church's secret meetings where they all hold hands and hug or something. I don't know what they do, but they spread the coronavirus is what they do. So now we've got a major problem in South Korea. Italy's got a major problem in Tuscany near Milano. I don't know why. Nobody knows why, but Europe's going to have to shut their famous open borders. That ain't going to stick around for very long. And it's going to now be absorbed into the market that we are in for a bad year. The mortality rate is, quote, just 2%. Now, some people on Twitter are saying, you have no idea it's really 10%. I just look, I don't argue over statistics. The statistics that the WHO put out say the mortality rate from coronavirus is 2%. The mortality rate from the flu is 0.07%. Okay, so what's 10 times 0.07%? 0.7%. And so you've got a virus that's, 20 times more lethal than the flu? It could be more, could be less, but it's bad. It's not Ebola. It's not even SARS or MERS, but it's bad. And when you read John Barry's book, The Great Influenza, and you realize that viruses mutate, they, quote, passage. They have a passage, and they get worse before they get better. That was the 1918 experience where about 675,000 Americans died from the Great Influenza. The like number would be 2 million. But I went to the National Harbor MGM Casino for the first time on Saturday night. Fetching Mrs. Hewitt is with the grandkids, so I'm by myself. I said, I'll go play some 7-card poker. I'm terrible at it. I may be the worst poker player in America. The guys could not. Now, of course, the very first hand I'm dealt, very first hand, I have a straight flush. But I don't quite see it, and I bet it the wrong way, but I still won the pot. It was a good-sized pot. It was a 1 to 3 minimum unlimited raise. I don't know how to bet. I don't know all. I don't
How
know. I
do
don't
you
want.
not see a straight flush?
Well, it was in the low cards.
What's the matter with you?
I had a flush. I knew I had a flush, but it was in the low cards. And I also, by the way, the first time I played poker in 25 years.
Who gets dealt a straight flush?
Well, there was an older African-American gentleman who was sitting across from me who decided I was the stupidest person on the planet because I didn't bet it the right way. I put in like $5 and $10 and everyone played. And then I roll over a straight flush and the guy said, "Oh,
you
my
idiot."
God." He just couldn't believe how I'd bet it. But in any event, that was the last good hand I had. I lost all my money, of course. But I went to see one thing. I have been told by many people that National Harbor MGM is a zoo, that it is full of thousands and thousands of everyone who comes to the nation capital goes there to gamble. I'd never been. It's across the river. It's in Maryland, and I don't go to Maryland. So I went across the river, and sure enough, there are thousands and thousands and thousands. I mean, every table's jammed, and it's early. I'm also if I'm not asleep at 10 o'clock, something strange has happened. So I left it. I lost all my money by 9 o'clock, my allocation. And I came home. But that place, because I wanted to be able to compare, jammed packed, all right? Nobody there is worried about coronavirus. There is no worry about coronavirus in the United States. The investors are looking forward. That's why markets are getting hammered. That place will be empty, 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 empty if coronavirus comes to D.C. Okay, now start thinking about the consequences of that. Because I was counting the number of dealers and people working. I was talking with my table mates, nice group of people. By the way, 2 did not speak English. They were somewhere in Asia. I don't know which country they're from. I can't identify people, but they didn't speak English. They still took my money. 2 African Americans, 1 Persian guy. I'm the only Anglo at the table. I'm the dummy. 6 different dealers, all of whom were very nice to me because I didn't know what the big river and the little river was. I don't know. I mean, people watch this stuff on TV. Carl could beat me at poker. I hadn't played poker since high school, but I wanted to do my reporting. So now I can tell Robert Costa, my reporting is that there's been no impact of coronavirus at multi-platform theater venues. I can do that kind of thing on TV because I've done some reporting. But it will be a ghost town if anything like South Korea happens here. And just start thinking about what that means for the economy, which is why Donald Trump, who is not in the country, he's in India in front of a rapturous crowd at the biggest stadium in India, but everybody in the government who listens, Leader McConnell, everybody put together a high-profile commission led by the vice president, add in a few governors like Doug Ducey and Ron DeSantis, add in a Democrat. Ducey and DeSantis are the best governors. Add in a bunch of people from Mayo and MD Anderson and Mass Gen and, gosh, save me, but it's true, USC's got a great medical school, maybe UCLA. Get some medical professionals to go along with Anthony Fauci because he can't do all the media. Set up a special Twitter account and man it every minute so that it knocks down rumors, so that everyone goes to one Twitter account and they see what's true and what's not true about coronavirus in the United States. One official U.S., not CDC. Don't let bureaucrats run it. No. Don't want bureaucraties. They're always wrong. Collective wisdom is always wrong. They underreacted serially throughout 1918 for fear of panic. There is no such thing as panic in a connected age. There's only information or a lack of information. And if there's a lack of information, people assume the worst like I do about Iran and China. So you want to have super information flood. So then you add in a couple legislators and then you appoint a couple of really great spokespeople. I mean, the best in the world. And you let them hold quarterly, 4 times a day briefings. 8 cases, 9 cases, this many traces, this many deaths, this mortality, this new drug, that new vaccine, blah, blah, blah. Flood the zone with information. Don't make people guess. Thus endeth Hugh Hewitt's view. I got to play Van Jones on CNN. Cut number 15 last night.
The thing is, look, in 2016, there was a rebellion in both parties. And the Republican Party took the form of Donald Trump. The Democratic Party took the form of Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders, who was written off as sort of like, Dennis Kucinich, redo. got 47% of our vote in 2016. You can't forget that. And so people thought, well, now Hillary can go on and become president. She didn't, and Bernie never stopped. I was in San Francisco like 3 years ago, and Bernie was there talking about Medicare for all with 8,000 people, and it wasn't even making the news. So the rebellion never stopped. And I think that's what you're seeing. And
that's exactly right, Van. Bernie in South Carolina, Bernie in Ohio, Bernie in Texas, Bernie in Virginia, Bernie. Don't go anywhere, America. It's Bernie Central on the Hugh Hewitt Show. Looks like they're going to be running from the markets all day long, America. It's going to be one of those days, one of those Black Monday days. Now, I think panic is ridiculous. I really do. We will eventually figure out coronavirus. A lot of people around the world will die. A few thousand people if we're lucky. Tens of thousands of people if we're unlucky. The world's best scientists are working on it. It's not like 1918 where they had no idea how to get an unfiltered virus of the 1918 variant. And we've dealt with coronaviruses before. We know what MERS and SARS, we know quarantines work. We know everything, but it will take a while to get it organized, and there will be a lot of misinformation, and there will be some panic. But you don't have to throw yourself off of a cliff. It's not the end of the world. Well, it's the end of the world if you're Joe Biden. Joe Biden's end of the world is coming soon, like Saturday in South Carolina or Super Tuesday. He was out there denying reality after Nevada, cut number 6.
Look, the good news is the field is narrowing. The better news, you're all taking really closer looks at the other guys now. You're all taking a real good look. They're not bad folks. They're just not Democrats. Anyway.
Yeah, they're not Democrats. Pete Buttigieg isn't a Democrat. Bernie Sanders isn't a Democrat. He got 46% of the Democratic votes. Maybe Joe's not a Democrat. Maybe they think he's not much of a candidate. But Joe went on to say, look, we're going to go to South Carolina and win there too. Cut number 10.
Thank you. Well, y'all did it for me.
Stop. A weak second place that we're not sure is second place because they can't count in Nevada any better than they count in Iowa. You all did it for me. Joe then, here's a montage. Joe saying South Carolina is a firewall and then saying I never said South Carolina was a firewall. Cut number 17.
If South Carolina, though, was your firewall.
You said it, my firewall. I've never said it.
The campaign has said it's your firewall.
That's not five. I said I'm going to do well there. And I think I have a real firewall in South Carolina. I've never said it.
The campaign has said it's your firewall.
That's not five. I said I'm going to do well there.
Joe, it's on tape, Joe. Even if you don't remember it, we can. I also talking to Margaret Brennan. He's moving the goalposts again on the firewall stuff. Cut number 16.
If South Carolina, though, was your firewall.
You said it, my firewall. I've never said it.
The campaign has said it's your firewall.
That's not five. I said I'm going to do well there. And I'll do well there, and I'll do well beyond there as well.
What does do well mean for you?
Look, you guys can do all the pontificating about what it means. I'm not going to, that's not my job. My job is to go in and make the best case I can, and I think we're going to do well. I think we're going to go on to Super Tuesday and do very well.
No, you're not, Joe. Bernie Sanders was on 60 Minutes last night. Gosh, I love Bernie being Bernie. This is why he's going to win in South Carolina on Saturday and Super Tuesday next Tuesday, because he's talking to the left-wing base and to people who've been screwed over in the country generally in a great economy, and the angry people are with Bernie. Cut number 26, Bernie promising Medicare for all, and what will it cost? Hey, Dwayne, we're cutting your salary by a few nickels and dimes. Just, I don't know what that means. Don't worry about it.
That's not going to happen.
No, just a few nickels and dimes. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
By the way, is America great? Cut number 27. Quick. This is why Bernie's going to win. He's talking to the people who have not been winners. Stay tuned. 33 minutes after the hour, America. My producers are having fun with me because I didn't recognize I had a straight flush in the river when I played poker on Saturday. That's because I don't know how to play poker, but I do know how to talk to Christian Whiton. Christian is, of course, a senior fellow for strategy and trade at the Center for the National Interest. Good morning, Christian. Great to have you back with us.
Good morning, Hugh. Great to be here.
Christian, would you describe to people, because we're going to talk about Rick Grinnell and the allergic reaction the narrative has to him. And the narrative means the left-wing media, Beltway, Manhattan media, industrial complex. They don't like Rick Grinnell. Before we talk about why he's superbly qualified to be the acting DNI, I'd like people to understand your credentials.
My credentials, well, I was at the State Department during the Bush administration, for most of the Bush administration, including working on issues like North Korea, then on the Trump transition and back at the early administration at the State Department, working on the transition, East Asia issues, including ones that touched very much on the consumption of intelligence by senior policyholders.
You're also the author of Smart Power Between Diplomacy and War. You appear frequently on Fox Business, Fox News. You've been on BBC, CNBC, CNN, MSN, everywhere. Christian Whiton is like I am. He's a utility infielder for the media. But he's actually unlike me because he's smart about national security matters. So, Christian, how long have you known Rick Grinnell? I've known him for a decade. He's a close friend. How about you?
About the same, about a decade. I certainly knew of him when he was up at the United Nations, the U.S. mission to the United Nations, and I was at Maine State. We were all fighting bureaucratic battles against an entrenched bureaucracy in that administration. It's gotten much worse in this administration, but I always knew of Rick as an ally up there, and then subsequently as a thought leader on foreign policy, someone who was out there fighting the fight and defining a foreign policy, a conservative foreign policy that was effective and palatable to the electorate.
Now, Ambassador Grinnell was appointed to the United Nations publicity staff, the comm staff, 10 years ago, but he eventually became a member of the UN Security Council with full voting rights in 2004. He's been ambassador to Germany for 2 years. He is the presidential envoy for Kosovo-Serbia negotiations. He's achieved a great breakthrough there. Graduate of Harvard's MPA program. Generally, do you think he's qualified to be the acting director of national intelligence?
Yeah, I don't know about the Harvard stuff, but certainly the rest of his credentials are very impressive. The idea that he isn't is just sort of the pinnacle of arrogance and insularity from the palace eunuchs of our intelligence bureaucracy and their handmaidens, to whom they leak in the media. I mean, as you point out, this is someone in New York, in Berlin, in Washington, who was at the highest levels of government and foreign policy, even when he was sort of just the press guy at the UN. He was a key senior aide to 4 different U.S. ambassadors to the United Nations. And that deals very much with using intelligence, sharing intelligence, issues like that.
Now, Christian, this came up on Meet the Press yesterday. I'm going to play you an almost 3-minute clip because I need your commentary on the exchange I have with Dan Pfeiffer at the end of it. But we're talking about Ambassador Grinnell throughout with Chuck Todd and Dan Pfeiffer of Team Obama. Cut number 4.
July 28, 2019, President Trump fires the Senate-confirmed Director of National Intelligence, Dan Coats. On August 8th, the president announces that Joseph Maguire will become the acting director. On that same day, the person who was supposed to have assumed the acting director slot, Sue Gordon, who was number 2, she resigned because she was passed over for that acting top job role. Then on February 19th of this year, Maguire is ousted by President Trump. The next day, Rick Grinnell is named acting director. By the way, Hugh, this is what makes this very suspicious. He made the first shakeup at DNI, was timed with that whistleblower report that was making its way through the DNI. This one is timed with this report about Russian interference. That's some nasty circumstantial evidence.
If you want the person who will be most effective in countering the Russian puppetry meme, you put Rick Grinnell, who is the most anti-Russian person on there. Also the most combative.
He's pretty partisan in political activism.
He came up as a Republican LGBTQ, so he is obviously going to be combative and had to earn his stripes the hard way. But if you want an anti-Russian person to combat the meme that you are pro-Russian, you put Ambassador Grinnell in that job.
I don't know that there's evidence that Maguire was any softer on Russia and the Kremlin than Grinnell is. And the important question, I understand. And the important question that Short didn't answer is why there was this rapid snapback of Maguire from that position and why the president decided he wanted to put Grinnell in just for a couple of weeks. there's still no clear message from the administration of the added benefit of installing this guy who clearly has national security credentials, but also has a very deep and long time working as a partisan and a vocal Trump ally into this incredibly sensitive and strategically important intelligence spot.
I think not since Bill Casey could I think of somebody as politically connected to get an intel job like this.
Right. I mean, I think we should be clear. He may have national security credentials, but he has no intel experience. And I know there's nothing more exhausting than playing imagine if Obama did X game, but imagine if Barack Obama had fired the career professional in charge of the intelligence directorate, put in a political operative, one with a history of pushing conspiracy theories, at the exact time Russia was trying to interfere in an election to help that candidacy. Like that, like Hugh would have exploded.
2 words, Ben Rhodes.
So he did not put him in charge of the DNI. He did not put him in front of the DNI.
I'm talking about a guy who has 10 years of intel experience by virtue of being a 10-year diplomat with the highest clearances in the security. I think that is a complete fabrication of the Beltway establishment that hates Grinnell because he is combative, but I think he's put in there for a reason, which is to be combative.
Yes, to be a political loyalist.
Not a loyalist, to be an anti-Russian face. The most anti-Russian person in the industry. All right, so Christian Winton, I think Ben Rhodes is the complete answer to this. I think those 2 words shut everything down. Your response?
Yeah, and same with Jim, same with Clapper, and same with Brennan. I mean, the idea that intelligence wasn't politicized is ludicrous. It has been politicized. What these people hate is the idea that it will become depoliticized. And we need to step back when you're considering all of these arguments and look at the track record, especially at DNI, which was supposed to be a very nimble, thin addition to the intelligence bureaucracy, because the CIA director, when he acted as the director of national intelligence, you had things like 9/11 happen and the lapse in intelligence related to WMD in Iraq. I think it was a mistake. DNI has gotten way too big. It produces junk like the sort of faux briefing, although it's unclear exactly what happened, but the briefing that Russians favor Donald Trump for the 2020 election is already backpedaling on that. CNN has already indicated that the story was phony. But, this is a flawed, troubled bureaucracy that does not produce intelligence that is useful to the President of the United States, real intelligence, which is information our adversaries don't want us to have. Instead, you get a lot of analysis, you get a lot of opinion. It's generated in Washington, not in the field. So Grinnell is being sent to trim down that bureaucracy and try and give it a chance to succeed at its original mission, and that is what these people hate.
Well, Michael McFaul, and I like Ambassador McFaul a lot out at the Hoover Institution, tweeted at me yesterday, "Hey, Hugh Hewitt on Meet the Press, I'd be comfortable with Grinnell serving as White House official in charge of NatSec communications and other policy stuff like Rhodes, but that's a different job than ODNI. We cannot politicize intel. Grinnell is a very partisan figure," to which I responded, Mr. Ambassador, let's stick to the facts as reported in the paper of record when it comes to Mr. Rhodes' job and not to characterization of degrees of partisanship, citing the New York Times article that had Ben Rhodes basically, I think they called him the guru of President Obama on foreign policy. He was not a spokesperson. He was a policy innovator. He pushed the JCPOA on us. Yeah, the aspiring novelist who became Obama's foreign policy guru, which was the May 5, 2016 article by David Samuels. There is simply no gainsaying that Ben Rhodes at the NSC was far more powerful than Rick Grinnell will ever be at the office as Director of National Intelligence, and that it was a national intelligence job. Am I wrong about that, Christian?
Well, I mean, that wouldn't be too tough on Ben Rhodes. He had a master's degree in creative writing, after all. No, yes, you are absolutely right. Everything was hyper-politicized in the Obama administration. I mentioned Clapper and Brennan before. I mean, there are people who are at the very top of the intelligence bureaucracy who are now sort of paid on left-wing or left-leaning networks to be liberal political commentators. That is what has resulted from that. I mean, you look at the way intelligence was phonied up. They phonied up intelligence on ISIS to suit Obama's narrative. They phonied up intelligence on Libya to suit Hillary's narrative after our ambassador to Libya was killed. It's just this long record. Of course, there's the whole Russia hoax, the phonied up intelligence of that. So again, Grinnell is not the one who's politicizing things. And the idea here also is that the palace eunuchs are supposed to be in charge of intelligence, and because it's classified, they can leak it selectively, they can undermine a president. That is very dangerous, and that's something that needs to be corrected. And frankly, the person who is the DNI should have the confidence and have a close relationship with the president, regardless of who he is. So it makes it I think, perfect sense for Grinnell to go and do this.
I like to stick to the facts. I tried to bring this out on Meet the Press yesterday. He has opposed the Russian pipeline Nord Stream 2. He's trying to get Germany up to their 2%. He's got the big deal between Kosovo and Serbia. He was one of the first people to call out Russia for shutting down Radio Free Europe. He's written extensively on Russia's attack on pro-U.S. political parties in Eastern Europe. He's absolutely written like 100, 200, 300 articles on foreign affairs, national security. But now he's going to be attacked. And I think the attacks are coming in terms of innuendo. I've gotten phone calls already. Did he ever work for a foreign government? The answer is no. I've known Rick for only, I guess, a dozen years. I don't think he's ever worked for a foreign government because I tell every one of my friends never work for a foreign government. They always say they know that. Are you aware? Did he ever work for a foreign government? Have you gotten that call yet?
No, he didn't. And that's interesting because there are some smears being made that he should have registered under FARA, the Foreign Agents Registration Act. I know the act really well. I'm not a lawyer, but that's completely bogus. That act is triggered when you conduct foreign affairs, public, publicity to the benefit of a foreign government, directed by a foreign government, or where the primary beneficiary is a foreign government or political party. It doesn't apply to corporations abroad, individuals abroad. There's a commercial exemption to the act. And all of these issues were already, I know with 100% certainty, considered by the Senate Foreign Relations Committee when he was up for Germany. That is not a pleasant committee to go to. That is not a pleasant committee. Bob Menendez, who has an outsized role considering he's in the minority, I mean, this is the character assassination committee, second only to the Judiciary Committee. And the fact that they didn't even bring this up, the people who are saying this on ProPublica and other media outlets, they've got some lawyers to say one thing or another. I really think these lawyers were sick the day they taught law at law school.
Well, I do teach law, and I know the Foreign Agents Registration Act, and I've always told people about it. Rick Grinnell has no ethical problems. He has no compromise. He does have a record on Russia. He does have experience in the intel community, and he does have the confidence of the president. I think it's a 5-star appointment. I don't think he's going to stay in it very long, but it's a 5-star appointment. Any doubt in your mind, Christian Whiton? Last minute to you.
Nope, it's a great one. Also, it's important to point out that this is a historic appointment. Point out Grinnell has been terrific as ambassador to Germany. I thought you'd have leaks of the bureaucrats there upset with him because they don't like a tough guy as ambassador. You haven't seen that. I think they respect him there. Certainly the Germans do, but our own government bureaucrats there. Also, this is the senior-most gay appointment ever made in government of an openly gay official to get a cabinet-level position, and that's a fundamentally important thing about Trump. He has reoriented the culture wars away from demonizing gays and more to where it matters, which is taking on political correctness in this woke cultural revolution.
Very good point. In fact, I got to spend a moment on this. Up until 2 decades ago, you could not be gay and serve in the intelligence community, openly gay and serve in the intelligence community. Now a gay man will lead it. I think that's historic, as well as being the first gay member of the cabinet. Donald Trump will get zero credit for that, Christian.
Of course. Yeah, no, it's very sad, but it's a big deal. And I think it also brings Grinnell close to that inner circle. So in the second Trump term, hopefully there are bigger and brighter things on his horizon.
Christian Whiton, good to have you. Thank you so much, my friend. Don't go anywhere, America. I didn't forget ReliefFactor.com. It's just sometimes I think something is so important I spend an extra minute on it. Head over to ReliefFactor.com. Spend $19.95. Don't forget to take it before your commute this morning and come right back to the Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. I can't believe you're abusing me for not recognizing a straight flush. I'm new to the game. I don't know how to play Texas Hold'em. When we were kids, we played 7-card stud. You get dealt 5 or 7. I don't know how we played it 40 years ago. I'm 64 years old. I don't even remember how to play poker. So for those of you who don't know, Hold'em is, they deal 2 cards to everyone. You look at it, you bet. So I had a 3 and a 5 of diamonds. I remember this quite well now. 3 and a 5 of diamonds. And because they were both diamonds, I thought to myself, well, that's not bad. My first hand in like 30 years. That's not bad. I'll play that. And I put the $3 in the chat around and flip over, which I think they called it. Got a couple of diamonds in it. So all of a sudden I got 4 diamonds, and I'm thinking, 4 diamonds, I'm in good shape. And so I bet $10. And a bunch of people put in $10. There were 7 or 8 players. And then the next card comes up, and it's not the card I need. It's 4 diamonds. I bet some more, but then up comes another diamond. So my brain, my little prehistoric brain says, a flush. I'll bet $25. And a bunch of people bet $25 because they had pretty good cards. Well, it turned out it was a straight flush. Now, anyone in their right mind would miss that because a 3 and a 5 in your whole cards, and then the 2, the 4, and the 6, it doesn't really visually present very well. If you understand what I'm saying, do I not make a good case? And so I didn't bet it right. I understand that. But come on, people, give me a break. All right, back to Robert O'Brien, National Security Advisor, on with George Stephanopoulos yesterday, blowing off the story, which has subsequently been confirmed by CNN not to be a story. CNN reporting that the intelligence briefer who went up and said Russia was trying to Trump overstepped her bounds. O'Brien made this clear on This Week with George Stephanopoulos yesterday before leaving for India with the president. Cut number 14.
Have you seen analysis from the intelligence community showing that one of Russia's aims in its election interference is to help President Trump?
Yeah, I have not seen that, and I get pretty good access. I think this is the same old story that we've heard before. I've seen the reports from that briefing at the Intel Committee. I wasn't there, but I've seen no intelligence that suggests that. I've also heard that from the briefers that that's not what they intended the story to be. So, look, who knows what happened over at the House and the Intelligence Committee, but I haven't seen any evidence that Russia's doing anything to attempt to get President Trump reelected. And our message to the Russians is stay out of the U.S. elections. We've been very tough on Russia.
Then went over and did Face the Nation and also knocked down the rumor that the DNI was fired. The acting DFNI, Admiral McGuire, was fired for the briefing. Cut number 24.
I'd have no problem with that, but that's not my decision. And the intelligence community is very concerned and careful about sources and methods, and I understand that. But I would personally have no problem.
But back in 2016, in October of 2016, when Russia was doing this disinformation campaign, the Obama administration did declassify information at that time. So there is a precedent. Why doesn't the Trump administration do that?
I think if there's intelligence that we can declassify, that we can get out there, all the better, because again, we weren't in office in 2016 when the last election meddling took place, and the administration did very little about it. And everyone admits that very little was done about it. We're in office now, and we're doing everything we can across the interagency and with our state and federal and local partners to ensure that American ballots are secure, that our ballot machines are secure, that tabulations are secure, that Secretary of State websites are secure. We want to make sure that this is a free and fair election, that Americans select their next president, not some foreign country. And we're going to do it. The president's been deadly serious about that.
I want to quickly ask you, though, about Afghanistan.
I love the fact that O'Brien was out there knocking this down. And then CNN came out last night, Jake Tapper, announcing that CNN is repudiating the story that the intelligence briefer told the Intelligence Committee that Russia was trying to elect Trump. They repudiated that story because what the intelligence briefer did was go beyond and speculate, make up stuff, and has a history of doing so, allegedly, according to CNN. Very important story. You know what's very important to you is that you know that the Clarence Thomas movie is out there, created equal Clarence Thomas in his own words. I want to talk to you about this movie again and again and again, and I'm urging you all to go see it, not just because it's a terrific film. It's an important film about a man that many of us know and admire, Justice Clarence Thomas. He began his life in crushing poverty. His memoir is My Grandfather's Son. I am my grandfather's son. Think about it. Because he didn't have a dad. His grandfather was a tough man, raised him. I can remember this book like I read it yesterday. The bone-chilling cold that they worked with in every morning. And Clarence Thomas went off to Holy Cross and became a radical. They went off to Yale and fell in with that wonderful guy, John Bolton. And together they became campus conservatives, and Clarence Thomas has never wavered despite the fire that he went through. His boisterous, rolling laugh continues to fill the hallway of the Supreme Court. He's a wonderful man. He's an inspiring guy, and you should go see this movie. JusticeThomasMovie.com to find out where Created Equal is playing in a theater near you. Don't go anywhere, America. Hour number 3 of this Monday morning edition of Hugh Hewitt comes back. Mollie Hemingway joins me from the Federalist. We talk about Rick Grinnell and coronavirus when we return. Stay tuned. Morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Greetings to my 400 affiliates spread far and wide. It's Hugh Hewitt on a day where coronavirus dominates the international headlines and markets are going to get pummeled. In England, they're down 3%. In Germany, they're down almost 4%. And who knows how far coronavirus will spread. To discuss that and the inevitability of the Bernie Sanders nomination, I am joined by Mollie Hemingway, senior editor at the Federalist. Follow her at MZ Hemingway and, of course, on Fox News. Good morning, Mollie. Good Monday to you.
It's great to be here with you.
What do you think about the statement I just made, the inevitability of the Bernie Sanders nomination?
I think it's his to lose at this point. And what is most surprising to me is how late it took most people to realize what a strong candidate he was. Part of that was that I think a lot of people just assumed when he had his heart attack a few months ago that he was done. But he's really been building a solid campaign and has enthusiastic crowds. And he won Iowa and he won New Hampshire, and the media tried to downplay both of those. But now it's hard to deny what a strong candidate he is.
Now, we will have a debate on Tuesday night, tomorrow night. And it's being run by the usual suspects. And the usual suspects never go after Bernie, ever, because it upsets the Bernie bros. Will that change?
Well, I wouldn't say that they never go after him, but they do such a weak job of it. Like even in that last debate, he's happy to talk about his agenda in big picture philosophical ways. When people oppose him, they usually just say stuff like, I think you're a bit too radical right now for us. They don't seem to oppose him on the merits, and that is a very unconvincing way to take someone on. So now I think people realize they've got to take him out in the next week or it's over. And that might change the way that they are with him. But he is very difficult because I think that it's the substance that's the problem. Nobody wants to take him on the substance of his support for socialism.
4 people on that stage will still be looking at 2 targets, though. Mike Bloomberg, as I said on Meet the Press yesterday, he had worse reviews than the movie Cats, which is almost impossible to do. But it could happen again because he was the most wooden. He was Geppetto's puppet on that stage. And I've never actually followed his career, Mollie Hemingway. I didn't care about New York politics. Has he always been that bad in public?
He has always avoided public engagement, and he's had the money to enable that. But I don't think he's ever been nearly that bad. In fact, I think it was somewhat surprising that he didn't seem, he had some fun when he was doing New York politics that just did not come through. And he supposedly had practiced very, very hard for that. I saw that also he's avoiding one of his town halls before the debate, a televised town hall, because he wants to prepare again for the debate. But I think what that misses is sometimes you prepare by being open to interviews, doing a lot of radio, television, having campaign events in public where people can engage with you. That's how you get good on the debate stage. But he's avoiding that.
I reached out to his campaign last week, had a couple of exchanges. And they said, we're thinking about it, we're open to it, et cetera. In fact, they're not. And the reason that they are not open to that is that they are not confident he knows how to handle policy questions. This is my view, is that he's a mayor. Mayors do things like trash and transportation. He's not very good on anything other than guns and climate change, meaning he doesn't even know his own mind on stuff. And I think that will be tempting for Joe Biden. Again, it's awfully hard to retarget. They all got themselves targeted on Bloomberg. Do you think the other 4 will be nimble enough? Bernie's just going to be Bernie. He hasn't changed once in 5 years. But will the other 4 be able to retrain their fire on him?
I think they have to, but I don't know. As impressive of a candidate as Bernie is, I don't find the rest of the crew to be altogether that impressive, with a couple of exceptions. It makes sense why they were going after Bloomberg. The media had thought that he was going to take this nomination for Bernie. He still has the money to withstand anything. I mean, normally if you have a debate performance like that, you would be close to done, but the only donor he needs to satisfy is himself, and that's happening. So there aren't the repercussions that you would normally see. They all know that Bernie is going to go into the convention with the most delegates. They're hoping that he can keep from having a majority, which they've done such a bad job at this point that they might not even be able to keep him from having a majority, so that they can have a brokered convention. And Bloomberg is still their best help for that, probably. Well, I don't know about that at this point.
If they take it away from him,
it's kind of a mess that they have,
If they take the nomination away from Bernie, it will be as though Robert Peel voted to repeal the Corn Laws. That's a very obscure reference to what happened to the Tory party, which split in two and were out of power for 2 generations as a result of an issue like Bernie presents to the Democratic Party. He has his turn. It's his turn, like 1972. If they take it from him, it will be disastrous for them. I want to turn to Rick Grinnell with you, Mollie Hemingway, because you're one of the few people who agree with me. There is this thing called the narrative. And when you fight with the narrative, it's like fighting with the Borg inside the Beltway. They get very angry. The narrative hates Rick Grinnell for a lot of reasons. One of them is he's as combative as can be because he came up as a gay man in the Republican Party and he had to be combative to fight his way through that. He's a veteran of Fox. I mean, they hate him for a lot of reasons, but he's superbly qualified to be the acting DNI. Why the blowback? What is going on here?
Well, mostly they hate people who are competent and who support the president. These are 2 basic requirements of effective work in any administration, but for some reason in this administration, those are the people that you have to take out, whether it's Attorney General William Barr or Rick Grinnell, people who are able to withstand the pressures of the media. And Rick Grinnell can, and he understands the importance of the high-level issues, and he's very effective. He was, as ambassador to Germany, he was very effective at advocating for the U.S. position there and getting and being strong on all of our European concerns. But mostly, I think what's in play here, too, is that we had, for many years, this unholy alliance between intelligence community officials, congressional officials, and the media that perpetuated a false and completely unsubstantiated smear that Donald Trump was a traitor who had colluded with Russia. And having Rick Grinnell, someone who doesn't fall for that silliness, in a position in the intelligence community is a threat to them. But I do want to say the way they've gone after him is hilarious to me. They say, on Twitter he advocates strongly for his views or whatnot. We have had for the last few years James Comey and Brennan and Clapper and every leader of the Obama intelligence apparatus who have acted like unhinged junior high school girls on Twitter. And the media never have a problem with it. In fact, they trumpet it up and isn't this great, this crazy resistance meme sent out by James Clapper. And yet when Rick Grinnell, who simply is just effective at what he does, comes to the forefront, well, then that's a problem.
Mollie Hemingway, yesterday, Ambassador McFaul, who I have a lot of respect for, he's a good guy. I've done a lot of work with him in the past, slammed me for comparing Ambassador Grinnell to Ben Rhodes. And I said, and because he said Ben Rhodes was just a comms director and Rick Grinnell's going to be the DNI and he's very partisan. Put aside partisanship. I think Ben Rhodes is as partisan as anyone in the country. But I also believe, according to the New York Times and other sources, that Ben Rhodes was a lot more than a comms director. And now they can't escape that, and they're trying to escape that. Ben Rhodes was the Svengali of Obama. I mean, now they're trying to downgrade Ben Rhodes, the mastermind of the JCPOA, into a staff guy on comms in order to tear down Rick Grinnell. It doesn't work, Mollie.
It doesn't work. And I also think, again, James Clapper was Obama's DNI. This is a guy who, on CNN and on Twitter sounds unhinged, positively unhinged, and who couldn't be more political, who has had problems with telling the truth to, reporters and to Congress and whatnot. So even that comparison, Rick Grinnell comes out much more favorably. This idea that you can downplay the role of Ben Rhodes, because it is embarrassing for them. Rick Grinnell is a guy with an amazing foreign policy background and history spent over decades. Ben Rhodes, I think he was like a creative writing major whose background is in fiction, who bragged about how he was able to convince young and silly journalists to help him craft an Iran storyline that helped pass the JCPOA. That is an embarrassing comparison for them, but you cannot change the reality that that's who he is.
But they're trying to change that reality. Now they're going to come after Grinnell, and I've been getting phone calls already. Did he work for foreign governments? The answer is no. He went through the Senate ambassador confirmation. They've been through all of his stuff. It's all open record. That will not stop them, Mollie. Last word to you. They will not let up on Grinnell, I think, because he's LGBTQ Republican. I really do believe a lot of this is rooted in the fact he is outside of the orthodoxy of the left.
Well, I actually think it's because he's just really good at what he does, and that he stands up to falsehoods, and he does so and has fun while doing it, and he's just really smart and knows what he's talking about. I think that's a bigger threat to them than anything else.
Mollie Hemingway, always a pleasure to talk with the senior editor of the Federalist. Follow her on Twitter at MZ Hemingway. Follow me to the next segment, America, on the Monday edition of the Hugh Hewitt Show. Bernie is back in South Carolina because they're all going to put a target on him on that debate stage on Tuesday night because Bernie's running away with it. And I don't know that he can be stopped. That's the conversation on air and off air. That's the conversation in green room and on sets. Inside the Beltway where I am, I'm Hugh Hewitt. Thank you for listening. Time for the AndrewandTodd.com economic story, market story, business story of the morning. AndrewandTodd.com is the website portal. If you go there and answer a couple of questions, I'll be right back to you with the very best option for you to refinance your house or to buy a house. By the way, when the 10-year Treasury is at 1.47% at the start of the day, on a day when the market is going to go down, 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 it's going to be a rough day on Wall Street. The coronavirus fears have swept through China and are sweeping through Europe and will sweep through American markets today. There'll be a lot of blood on the floor on the New York Stock Exchange. A lot of people are going to lose 3, 4, 5% of their wealth today. Gold is up. It's about getting close to $79 an ounce. Oil is down to $51 a barrel. But the 10-year Treasury, the only body who wins is someone who's buying a house or refinancing a house. That's AndrewandTodd.com. They're Sierra Pacific Mortgage. Call them at 888-888-1172. 888-888-1172. Get the best rate to consolidate debt. Get the best rate on a new house. Go out and buy the house that you've been waiting to buy or the investment property or the retirement home. Today is the day. All week long, probably, but today is the day. The big story I've already told you. Oil is slumped. Gold is soared. The G20 has warned of the virus's risk to global growth. When the G20 gets involved, they're worried. The group of 20 major economies warned yesterday that the fast-spreading coronavirus posed a serious risk to global growth and agreed to take action should the epidemic's impact intensify, according to the Rory Jones story in the Wall Street Journal this morning. Finance ministers and central bankers discussed the virus alongside trade and geopolitical tensions at a weekend meeting in Riyadh, the first such summit held in Saudi Arabia, which is host to the G20 this year. The officials didn't outline specific joint measures, but they note the human tragedy, but they also note that China's annual growth is going to be at least down by 0.4 percentage points. I think it's going to be bigger than that, and I believe it's catching. It's going to go around the world, and I believe our growth is going to get hit, and I believe Donald Trump has got to get ahead of this with a high-profile, perfectly peripatetic leader, maybe the vice president, along with other people, to be in the front, the vanguard of warning people about good information and bad information. But one good piece of advice, if you're ever going to refinance, do it today. AndrewandTodd.com, 888-888-1172. Maybe rates will get a little bit better than this, but it will only be on the margins. I mean, they're the best I've ever seen. 888-888-1172. Panic in the markets is bad for everyone except people buying or refinancing. And that's what, if you are one of those people, AndrewandTodd.com. That's where you go. Let me also remind you, you should go to see the Clarence Thomas movie. I tell you about it every hour because I really want people to make this a success. JusticeThomasMovie.com to find out where it is. Monday is a great day to go to the theaters. Nobody's there. Everybody's at work. They're getting ready. It's just nobody's there. It's a great day. Get the best seat. Created equal. Clarence Thomas, in his own words, it will make you laugh and cry, and it will make you applaud. And you will be inspired by his life and by his perseverance and by how he put up with everything the left could throw at him, and he emerged stronger for it. A boisterous, wonderful voice of hope and inspiration in his own words. Created equal, Clarence Thomas in his own words. In the Washington Post, Pete Buttigieg is questioning the Nevada results, which is hard to do because we don't have the full Nevada results. All we know is that Bernie won in a blowout. But Pete thinks he finished second. That would matter a lot if he did. Meanwhile, the Post also reports in a Costa Rucker piece, Robert Costa, Philip Rucker, Bernie Sanders, powered by a diverse liberal coalition, forces a reckoning for Democrats. The first sentence reads, Bernie Sanders has seized a commanding position in the Democratic race, building a diverse coalition that is driving his liberal movement toward the cusp of a takeover of a major political party. That, my friends, is the beginning of Inevitability. How do you spell inevitability? Sanders. I'll be right back on the Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt on this Monday from inside the Beltway. Pleased to welcome back Senator John Cornyn from the great state of Texas. Good morning, Senator. How are you?
Morning, Hugh. Good to be with you.
Are you still a member of the Intel Committee, Senator?
I am.
Well, that gives us like the perfect guest for this morning to talk about the appointment of Rick Grinnell as the acting director of national intelligence, as well as this fiasco in the House Intel Committee. Let's start with Ambassador Grinnell. How do you assess his qualifications to become the acting DNI, Senator Cornyn?
Well, as I understand it, Hugh, it's an interim appointment, and because Joe McGuire's acting status had timed out, and I hear the president has 4 candidates that he's going to propose for a permanent director. But I suppose, ambassadors get security clearances, and I don't really know Mr. Grinnell personally, but I'm not too worried that about the Office of National Intelligence on an interim basis. Let me put it that way.
I've known him for a long time. I mean, a very long time, more than a decade. And I know he spent 10 years in the State Department, both at Germany and at the UN. He was on the Security Council for a period of time in 2004 when we needed someone appointed to that. He's written hundreds and hundreds of articles on national security affairs, just did the Kosovo-Serbia deal. He's a Russia hawk, and he's got all the clearances. I do not understand why Democrats are melting down over this, other than the fact that he is a Trump loyalist, Senator Cornyn.
Well, that explains a lot, and thanks for that background. That makes me feel better about his interim appointment. But, I think anything that happens in Washington, whether it's a Trump tweet or whether it's a story like this, the Democrats' heads explode, and then we go, down another rabbit hole. I'm not too worried about it. I think the intelligence community will survive. We'll continue to do the appropriate oversight in the Senate Intelligence Committee, which isn't as partisan as the House Intelligence Committee is. And if we see something wrong, we'll call them on it.
Last night, Jeremy Diamond, Jake Tapper, and Zachary Cohen put out a story at 5:52 p.m. Eastern Time, which is a big story. U.S. intelligence briefer appears to have overstated assessment of the 2020 Russian interference. According to the headline, it begins, the U.S. intelligence community's top election security official appears to have overstated the intel community's formal assessment of Russian interference in the 2020 election, omitting important nuance during a briefing with lawmakers earlier this month. 3 national security officials told CNN. The official, Shelby Pearson, told lawmakers on the House Intelligence Committee that Russia is interfering in the 2020 election with the goal of helping President Donald Trump get reelected. The story continues. The U.S. Intelligence Committee has assessed that Russia is interfering in the 2020 election and has separately assessed that Russia views Trump as a leader they can work with, but the U.S. does not have evidence that Russia's interference this cycle is aimed at reelecting Trump. The official said, quote, "The intelligence doesn't say that," one senior national security official told CNN. Quote, "A more reasonable interpretation of the intelligence is not that they have a preference. It's a step short of that. It's more that they understand that the president is someone they can work with. He's a deal maker." Well, what a lot of good that does us, Senator Cornyn, after we have 2 days full of innuendo that Russia's out working to elect Donald Trump again.
Well, it's the same old bad movie that we saw following the 2016 election. I've been in all of the classified briefings that we've had on the 2016 election and the 2018 midterms and the run-up here to 2020. I think the administration and the intelligence community in particular is on top of this in a way that they were not under the Obama administration in 2016. We have to remember that part of the problem in 2016 was the Obama administration knew the Russians were engaged in active measures trying to divide us and cause chaos and dissension, but didn't do anything about it until after the election when the formal intelligence community assessment came out. I think Mr. Durham is looking into that and the basis for that, and I expect we'll hear more later.
Now, let's switch over, if we can, to coronavirus. Has the Intel Committee received any kind of briefing on the rapidity of the spread of the virus?
Yes, we have.
What's your level of concern?
Well, I was down in San Antonio this last week, where some of the folks who are being held in quarantine, Americans that have been repatriated from mainland China, are being held. My impression is the administration and particularly Health and Human Services is doing a good job. working with the military and the public health service to make sure that people who've been exposed but who are not yet symptomatic are quarantined for at least 14 days so that the risk is basically dissolves after that, at least for them personally. And if they're symptomatic, then they're medically evacuated to specialized facilities around the country. I'm pretty impressed with the plan that HHS and the administration has in place. Other countries, it looks like, have not taken this as seriously, and it looks like over in Europe and South Korea that they've got a problem.
Now, Senator, I just finished rereading The Great Influenza by John Barry, and the lesson I take away from the 1918 experience is that governments tend to serially underreact for fear of overreaction, and therefore there is not enough information. I don't actually believe the administration is doing enough, and I like Secretary Azar a lot, and of course I think the president can do more via his Twitter feed, et cetera. Did the Intel Committee get feedback opportunities? Because if I were the administration, I would be pounding the drum every minute with all the information that's out there so that the American people have confidence that the entire story is being told every day, repeatedly, through many forums.
Well, I think they are, at least in their briefings of the Senate Intelligence Committee and the Congress. Whether it's enough for the public generally, I'm not as confident of that. But I do know the big part of the problem is that China is not sharing information. They obviously don't want to be embarrassed by this. But it's a real big problem, not only in China, but with people who have visited China and now are returning back home all over the world. I think my impression is we're doing a better job than the rest of the world, but whether it's good enough, only time will tell.
Well, and that's where it comes back to the Senate maybe helping the administration move it along. You're getting the briefings, but when I see stories pop up that Italy's got 8 new dead, and Iran, who knows what those people have got? They won't tell us the truth. China won't tell us the truth. That's why the market's going to open up 700 points down today. I mean, it's going to be a bloody day on Wall Street, and the only way to stop that is more information, not less.
Yeah, it's hard for people to know if you're just a regular working person in America to know whether the source of the information you have is valid or not. I mean that pervades our whole society now. Just people with no real knowledge, but willing to make a statement and mislead people inadvertently or inadvertently. So it maybe there is a more important role for the government to come out with official information that people at least can have some more confidence in.
Yeah, I'm going to write something for the Post about flooding the zone. Let me turn to your friend Bernie Sanders. I say that because everyone in the Senate refers to their friends across the aisle. You've been in the Senate a long time. Bernie's been in the Senate a long time. He looks like the presumptive nominee. Are you surprised?
Well, I am a little bit surprised that Democrats would unite in reelecting President Trump, which is what I think the consequence of that would be. Bernie Sanders is an authentic guy. I mean, he believes what he says, which actually makes him scarier to me. But, this country is not ready to elect a socialist. Certainly in Texas, we're not going to vote for a socialist. And maybe that's what we need is a good old-fashioned campaign and a debate about the merits of the free enterprise system and the prosperity and security it's yielded versus failed ideologies like socialism.
Well, that's exactly why I voted for Bernie in the open primary in Virginia. I got to vote early absentee because I won't be here on 3-3. So I got my vote and I voted for Bernie because I just want a clear knockdown battle between free enterprise and socialism. I think we win that. But Democrats don't seem to have any plan to do other than nominate him. You've watched a lot of election cycles. I think he's even going to win the Texas primary, Senator, and I think it's an open primary, and we might find more Hugh Hewitts down there voting for Bernie.
Well, he is leading according to the current polls, and he's coming with some momentum out of Nevada and obviously Iowa and New Hampshire. He could well win the primary, but I don't know what that says about Democrats who voted for one of the other candidates who will probably stay home or won't support Bernie, may end up supporting Trump as from their perspective, the lesser of two evils. So I think this portends well for Trump's reelection and for our success keeping Texas a red state.
What does Bernie, what does he like to work with? Have you done any legislation with him? I can't imagine it, but have you done anything with him?
Bernie doesn't actually do legislation very much. He, he's on the budget committee, and usually he's against anything that the Chairman Enzi and the Republicans propose there. He has done some work. I have to give him some credit on veterans issues, working with Johnny Isakson, the late great chairman of the Veterans Committee. But beyond that, Bernie doesn't seem to be in the Senate to actually do much legislation. It's obviously a platform for his higher aspirations.
And he seems to have successfully seized the Democratic Party. Last question, Senator. In Texas, where the primary is Super Tuesday, does he have the lead among Democrats? Is that what I heard you say?
That's what the polling that I've seen says. And it looks like the cohort of people turning out to vote, at least in early voting, which ends February the 28th, are heavily weighted toward younger people, which seems to be his core support group.
You know, it's just remarkable to me that the Democratic Party has gone this far to the left. Not surprising, but remarkable. Yeah. Senator John Cornyn, always a pleasure to speak with you. Your re-election campaign. What's the website, Senator?
JohnCornyn.com.
I love the fact it's easy. JohnCornyn.com. Go over there and get that one. We need to get John Cornyn back to the Senate, especially on the Judiciary Committee. Hey, America, time for me to tell you about HonorBoundCoffee.com. HonorBoundCoffee.com. All one word. You should not sip a cup of coffee that isn't Honor Bound coffee. They got 4 different great brews, 4 different methods of preparation, 4 different grinds. One great taste in all of those coffee cups, and every dollar of profit from Honor Bound Coffee goes to support military families. They're beginning with the Injured Marine Semper Fi Fund. They will spread out. They will find other ones. But you subscribe to it. That means you never have to go shopping for coffee again. You'll never be out of coffee again, which is one of the most annoying things in the world at the studio on either coast, is not to have coffee. And that's never going to happen again because of the subscription service. You always need coffee. You should get the coffee from the people that support the veterans. HonorBoundCoffee.com. Pete and Seth Talbot started it. Great father and son team from the Pacific Northwest that have done so well with ReliefFactor.com and their other lines of businesses. They said, let's do something for the troops. Let's do something for their families. Thank you, Pete and Seth. HonorBoundCoffee.com. That reminds me, though, if you're about to go out on your commute, don't forget your ReliefFactor.com. A little bit late in D.C., 8:45. People have already at work and inside the Beltway. But if you're leaving for work in the Rocky Mountain states, or you're about to get in the car in Seattle or L.A. or San Francisco, turn around, go back in, and get ReliefFactor.com. Don't leave home without it. Make sure you take those 4 natural supplements that make every day a little bit easier. They provide support for the temporary relief of the minor aches and pains that come with aging and exercise. Maybe you overdid it this weekend. Went a little bit far on Sunday or Saturday in your weekend warrioring. Well, whatever the problem is, ReliefFactor.com will make you feel better if it's muscular. Relief for the temporary support for the relief of minor aches and pains that come with exercise, aging, walking, trundling, running, weight room, biking, whatever you did. That's what ReliefFactor.com is for. Don't go anywhere, America. I'm coming back with Tim Alberta of Politico as we size up the lead that Bernie Sanders has. Quite remarkably established, the momentum is all on Bernie's side. The Bernie Bros are winning. Stay tuned. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt, joined by Tim Alberta of Politico magazine, who will have an accurate assessment of where Bernie Sanders stands this morning on the, I think, on the cusp of running away with it. Am I right, Tim Alberta?
Well, look, if you stripped his name off of his candidacy, Hugh, and just looked at this as an academic exercise, you would say that the guy who won 2 of the first 3 states outright, and in the third state was sort of technically the winner, although Iowa's rules are so draconian and backwards that it's hard to say definitively, then you would say that, yeah, that person's the front runner. And especially when you consider that person winning the third state of Nevada by a margin of 30 points plus, then you would say that that person's a runaway train. And this is, I think in many ways, pardon me, eerily similar to the situation we found ourselves in 4 years ago, where Donald Trump started amassing these bigger and bigger margins of victory. It's not just that he was winning; it's that he was winning by quite a lot. And at a certain point, people have to just sort of understand what the reality of that is. Organization matters, money matters, but ultimately, the thing that matters most when voting gets underway is momentum and the narrative that's created by wins and losses. And for all the attention still being paid to, the Elizabeth Warrens of the world, I mean, she's failed to break double digits in 2 of these first 3 states. I mean, her campaign, barring some biblical miracle, is just dead in the water. And I think the same goes for most of the other campaigns. So, again, you could see a scenario where Joe Biden comes into South Carolina this Saturday and pulls off a huge, sort of momentum-restoring victory, and suddenly he has fresh life in his campaign and he has the chance to take on Bernie and go the distance. But at this point, anybody who says Bernie is not a prohibitive frontrunner is just kidding themselves.
I want to give the last numbers. John Ralston reported 32 minutes ago that the final in Nevada, I hope, is Sanders 46.8%, Biden 20.4%, Buttigieg 13.9%, Elizabeth Warren 9.8%, Tom Steyer 4.6%, Amy Klobuchar 4.2%. Turnout was 100,000 people. That is 16,000 more than 2016. Guy Benson noting that Bernie beats the next 3 combined. Bernie can stand on that stage and look at everyone up there and said, I just shellacked you. I just shellacked you in Nevada. How dare you? I mean, that is not merely a win. Given the Culinary Union didn't even endorse him, it's a rout, Tim Alberta.
Yeah, it is a rout. And Hugh, so there's a couple of things. Your point about winning, taking a higher percentage than the next 3 combined is astonishing in its own right. I think the other thing to think about here is that, traditionally, we in the last 40 years of presidential politics, we have seen this sort of 3 tickets out of Iowa mentality where the field winnows pretty quickly following Iowa and certainly following New Hampshire. That has not happened in this 2020 cycle. You still have, 6 or 7 candidates who are spending a lot of money, who have organization, who are, considering themselves still to be viable. So for Bernie Sanders to almost take an outright majority against a field of, again, 6 or 7 people still standing is just absolutely stunning.
Now, in terms of tomorrow night, CBS has a debate. Do they all keep up? Can they retarget? They all were focused on Bloomberg. And as I said on Meet the Press yesterday, his reviews were worse than the movie version of Cats. It was so bad. But do they all turn their Gatling guns from Bloomberg and train them on Bernie? And if so, are they going to bring down the wrath of the Bernie bros on them?
Well, I think that is the point, Hugh. A lot of these folks have been very reluctant to tango with Bernie, in no small part due to the fact that they realize he has a very engaged, very energized base, and if any of them are hoping to, not just ultimately win the nomination, but be able to take on Trump, pardon me again, they know they're going to need a fully mobilized progressive base behind them. So in many ways, Hugh, and again, there's not a perfect parallel here between 16 and 20, but for some of the same reasons that many of these Republicans were reluctant to take on Trump because they were afraid of alienating some of his supporters, it's the same thing here with Sanders. And just as with Cruz and Rubio and Kasich in 2016, if these guys start going after Bernie now, it's going to. I think it's just too little, too late. I mean, it has to be a sustained effort to try and go after somebody like
and
this.
30 seconds, Tim. 30 seconds. If you got Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar and some others, they have careers in 2024, 2028. They've got maybe Tom Steyer has a Senate race in 2 years. They really can't torch Bernie, can they? And not damage their longer term prospects?
Well, and that's the balancing act. I think Buttigieg, more than anybody who you just mentioned, this is clearly someone who has a very bright future in national politics, and that's a consideration he's going to have to make. But he's been the sharpest critic of Bernie over the last 2 weeks, so we'll have to see.
Tim Alberta, follow him on Twitter at Tim Alberta and from Politico magazine. Thank you. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Generalissimo. Do not forget, America, the JusticeThomasMovie.com. Go find out where it is playing in a theater near you. Created Equal is an amazing film. It will inspire and uplift you, and you need to go see it. JusticeThomasMovie.com, JusticeThomasMovie.com. Don't get panicked by Wall Street today. All will be well, and I'll be back tomorrow on the next Hugh Hewitt Show.